I'll crush you!
Hello you demons and happy Friday. Now on this channel we've covered some pretty interesting horror movies, to say the least.
I come from the land of the Irish Spring.
However, what if I said the same horror movie franchise that brought you this
Open up now, like a good girl.
also brought you this? If you guessed Evil Dead, you are correct, because today we are going to be going over one of my childhood favorite horror movies, if you could even call it that, Army of Darkness. Released on February 19th of 1993, this movie had a budget of 11 million, and let me tell you, the entire time it plays like one long Looney Tunes episode starring Ash Williams. Despite that though, it has a 68% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 7.4 out of 10 on IMDb. Although that's not to say filming didn't also come along with its fair share of challenges. Not only did production last 100 days, but had a lot of bumps in the road, such as a constantly changing budget, extreme temperatures on their desert set, and a very, very complex choreography that Bruce Campbell had to remember step by step, which apparently caused him a lot of anguish, you know, because he had to fight things that weren't there. But we'll get into that later. To give you an idea of just how complex these choreography sets were, Sammy Raimi, the director, is quoted saying, "Make him go through torture." Meanwhile, crewmates reported Bruce constantly swearing to himself, messing up numbers of choreography constantly. Okay, but that's enough fun facts for now. We need to get into this movie because it is insane how it opens. Now, of course, being a 90s movie, it opens up with Ash Williams giving a very stoic recount of what happened in the second movie while the events play before us. This is when we learn that Ash was trying to do something about securing the Necronomicon while accidentally opening up a wormhole that, of course, is done very beautifully with an amazing display of green screen. If you thought that was great, don't worry. There's going to be way more examples of amazing green screen as we go forward. So after we get this epic title card with, I want to say, absolutely banging music, this then leads into Ash falling from the sky in the middle of what seems to be nowhere, only to be surrounded by a bunch of knights. That's right, ye old knights. And what do? Of course, they surround the stranger, and they make sure that he's not, I guess, part of this enemies group called, Duke Henry or something like that. Meanwhile, as they're securing Ash, they're beating his car with swords as if it's a dragon or something. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure they weren't very educated in the medieval times, but like, either way, after hitting his car like a bunch of idiots and strapping him in this sort of stock, which somehow works even though he's missing a hand, I'm not sure how they got that to work, they take him to the castle. Oh, and mind you, throughout this whole intro, this is the nicest we will see Ash. Of course, because he's in a strange place, he doesn't know these people, so he tries to open up negotiations. This will change. As he's getting taken to the castle though, this one character just will not stop whipping him, and I just remember watching this being like, okay, that's a bit much. Now, I don't know if it was just cutting to every time we saw him get whipped, but like...
My name is Ash, and I am a slave.
As they enter the castle walls, Ash is then immediately accosted by a bunch of children. Fight back! Fight back! And even beat up by this woman whose husband was killed by Duke Henry's men. Also, for some reason, there's this very zesty blacksmith that really knows how to like display every single emotion just through his face. But anyway, Ash is then trying to plead his case, and in doing so...
You gotta understand, man, I never even saw these assholes before!
We are then introduced to something known as the Pit. Now, we don't know what the Pit is. However, when one person is thrown through it, it's honestly pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie. This is though when we get a scene where after everything unfolds, it starts to pan over to Ash and some random guy in the crowd says, "Hey Tim!" "Hey Trimble!" Like, yeah, of course he freaking trembles. He just saw a blood fountain shoot up out of this pit that he's gonna get tossed in. So anyways, this is when Ash is then hit on the back of the head with the random rock and, you know, gets woozy and falls into the blood pit. This is when we see a very genuine reaction from Ash actually seeing a Deadite. Now, I don't know about you guys, but knowing what I know about them, I'd be just as terrified, if not more, than he was right there. This is when they get into a fist fight because I guess, you know, the Deadites want to throw hands at this point in history, and it's goofy. Ash is then thrown a chainsaw by this mysterious Merlin character, and that's where he gets this very epic magic girl transformation where he throws his fist up, or lack of a fist, his nub up, and catches the chainsaw. Oh, but it doesn't end there. As he's about to escape, another Deadite comes out, but mind you, twice as creepy as the first one he came into, and the group up there decides to bring spikes in on the both of them. Ash makes his very narrow escape by climbing up the spikes, or sorry, a chain, and the ghoul is then crushed. Or so we think. This is when one of the main kings or whatever of the castle decides to challenge him to a duel.
Sword boy!
In which Ash shoots his sword, because I guess he had a gun this whole time. I'm not sure where he got it. Either way, he then makes his very infamous or famous speech about his boomstick. I'm sure you guys have seen it. This is when Ash decides to change up his entire personality towards these guys and just become the biggest jerk they have ever known.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
Also, during that speech, he says that shotgun that he has a hair trigger, but he just decides to twirl it in his hand like it's just a toy for some reason, like that wouldn't just go off and blow some random passerby's head off, or his own. While Ash is now indulging himself in this castle suite somewhere surrounded by a bunch of women feeding him, we get this strange, like, sneak attack done by the Deadites, because apparently they're not done with him or not dead or something. Scary old Deadite grandma ambushes them, and this is when we get this Merlin character pop in after a very intense fight scene.
If the Necronomicon fell into the hands of the Deadites, all mankind will be consumed by this evil.
Either way, they discover they need the Necronomicon in order to return Ash back to his time, and he has to gear up to go do that.
Groovy.
As Ash is going to get the Necronomicon, he goes through this woods where we get the very famous camera creature that we never see, but is very intimidating. It chases him off of his horse, and eventually he runs into a windmill where he takes refuge. We then get a scene while Ash is inside the windmill where he then looks at a reflection of himself in a mirror and immediately just runs at it, breaks it. But this is where things start to very quickly unravel. Those glass shards on the floor that are reflecting him turn into little versions of him. That's right, like little homunculi versions of Ash, and they decide to torture him in various ways that are, again, very goofy.
Ramming speed!
Meanwhile, while all this is going down, we have the most horrendous display of green screen. They tie him down and one of them jumps into his stomach and starts to grow, but Ash, being the unhinged person that he is, decides to get a kettle of steaming hot water and drink it to kill the guy. But it doesn't kill him, and instead starts to grow.
Oh! God, it's growing bigger!
I kind of got to give it to them though. For the technology that they had at the time, I think they did a pretty good job with showing the slow progression of his twin growing out of him. Granted, we get a few uncanny shots of like his evil twin then eventually grows into a whole new person and detaches from him. This is when it starts to bully him in a very evil way and actually declares that he is the evil Ash. And very simply, Ash decides to just blow his face off. After doing so, he decides to deal with him as he did all the other Deadites by chopping them up into little pieces, throwing them in a bag, and then burying them. But it starts to talk to him as he's burying him.
What's that you got on your face?
Huh?
Blah, blah!
After dealing with his evil twin and burying him in the graveyard, Ash comes across the multiple books of the Necronomicon. Now, of course, only one of these Necronomicons is the true Necronomicon, and the other ones are just kind of like traps for him. So trying the books, one of them bites him and flies away. The other one is a black hole book that sucks him in and makes his face stretch out in a very goofy fashion where he shakes his head and fixes his face. But this last one is the true one. This is when he's supposed to say these magical words that the Merlin character told him to say, but he can't remember the last word. Now, without context, this one quote is just really bad.
It's an N-word. It's definitely an N-word.
Ash, of course, forgets the last magic word to say in order to safely pick up the book, which causes the entire cemetery to start rumbling as if there's an earthquake, and for gravestones to start shooting up out of the floor like rockets. As he's leaving, though, he trips and a bunch of skeleton hands start to beat him up. So after getting beat up by all those skeleton hands in the graveyard, Ash runs to the kingdom to return the Necronomicon. Meanwhile, it's revealed that evil Ash, who was disembodied, was then put back together, I don't know how, and decides to raise an army of stop-motion skeletons. Ash then returns to the kingdom with the Necronomicon and says that he didn't say that last magic word that he needed to, which caused the army of the dead to come back. Ash, being the selfish person that he is, says, hey, I got the Necronomicon, you promised to bring me back, do it. So everybody's shaming him big time for trying to leave, but then, out of nowhere, of course, this weird flying creature picks up the love interest, Sheila, and carries her away. And this is when Ash decides to stay and fight. Scouts come back to the kingdom, revealing that the army of the dead have in fact started gathering near the forest, and everybody starts giving like tactical commands, like what are we gonna do? How are we gonna prepare? And some random guy just says, I'm afraid. During this whole training montage, Ash teaches like 60 guys how to use very basic attacks with the sticks, teaches some of the other people chemistry, and does his best to, I guess, prepare them for the inevitable fight against the army of the dead. And before they know it, the skeletons are upon them. And with the sickest intro that I have ever seen for an army. It is then revealed that within a matter of a few minutes, Sheila has been turned into an evil deadite, and the army of skeletons charges the castle wall. This is where we get a really funny scene where Ash is up there with all the archers who have like explosive arrows, and they start shooting them down at the skeletons, but eventually the skeletons make it into the kingdom, where they then start to sword fight with everybody, and Ash reveals this insane Mad Max car with like a spinning propeller on the front of it.
Say hello to the 21st century.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, this thing's actually pretty cool. It's like turning these skeleton prop figures into like dust as it's going by them. This is when Sheila, of course, reveals herself in the midst of the battle, and Ash sees her as this very beautiful person that she was at the beginning of the film, only to then crash his car because he doesn't want to hit her. But of course, as we all know, that was a trap, and she was actually evil, and he has to deal with her. Evil Ash finally joins the fight and decides to rip the Necronomicon from this cage they have it behind. Now at this point, it's not looking very good for Ash in the kingdom, Their walls have been breached, the Necronomicon has been seized by Evil Ash, and Evil Ash is just killing them, but we get this epic endgame scene. Duke Henry. Why? Because Ash at the beginning of the film said, hey, let him go when he was on his power trip. Duke Henry joins the fight and turns the tide of the war in favor of Ash and the team. Ash and his evil twin eventually encounter each other on the battlefield and have their final fight. Now I'll give it to them, for the choreography of the time, it was pretty good. Played a little dinner theater-y, but it was really good. I was entertained. During their epic fight, Ash sets Evil Ash on fire, but it's not over yet. He comes back as a skeleton with eyeballs.
I got a bone to pick with you.
The fight then continues until Evil Ash is about to deliver the killing blow, or so it seems. Evil Ash landed on a catapult, and Ash notices this and cuts the catapult to launch its explosive payload up into the sky. And with that explosive finish, the army of the dead is fended off from the castle, and Duke Henry and that current castle decide to unite. And of course, we get the cinematic ending where everybody cheers and stuff, and Ash is then sent back to his own timeline and goes back to working at S-Smart. This is when a Deadeye in the S-Smart comes at him randomly and, he fights it. However, there is an alternate ending. In this other ending, the Merlin character tells Ash to take 3 drops from a vial after they encave him in this sort of pseudo-tomb with his car, and he'll wake up in his own timeline. However, Ash, like before, doesn't pay attention, and he takes too many drops, where he then sleeps way past the time he was supposed to wake up. I think the other ending had some good merit to it. But that is the end of one of my childhood favorite horror films, Army of Darkness, starring Ash Williams. Thank you all so much for watching. If you guys like this video, don't forget to hit like and watch the other ones that I have on this channel. They're pretty funny for different reasons, but I'd have to say between the two, probably Leprechaun is one of my favorite ones. No, Killer Clowns. I can't decide. Either way, subscribe for more funny, spooky content like this, and as always, everybody, stay spooky. Bye-bye.